Mueller madness. We'll try and give you a high-level overview of how this all went down. Cory Booker's profound ignorance on gun laws. It's unbelievable. And a movie review. We'll be talking about these and a few other topics as time permits. I'm Big E, and this is the Liberty Cast. So unless you've been living under a rock for the past week or so, you're well aware that Robert Mueller has concluded his investigation and found that President Trump is not guilty of collusion with Russia. I'm going to try and break it down for you, give you a high-level bird's eye view, but there's a lot to tackle. It was almost 2 years of investigation, so I'm just going to try and hit the highlights. And like I said last week, I don't spend a lot of time on it, and hopefully I won't spend much more time on it until the full report is released in a couple weeks. And Attorney General Barr hopes to have that done by mid-April or sooner. We'll see. But it's been proven now that there was no collusion, which really isn't even a crime. In order for it to be a crime, there would have had to have been a conspiracy to break the law. But that aside, no collusion or conspiracy to commit a crime was found. So what started this whole thing, besides the fact that the left is suffering from an acute case of Trump derangement syndrome, it was the dossier, or the dossier, as former CIA Director John Brennan says. The left has tried to tell us over the past couple of years that it was George Papadopoulos and his meeting with an Australian diplomat that was the genesis of the investigation. But nothing came out of that, and Papadopoulos was never charged with anything relating to collusion. He was charged with lying to the FBI, which is still suspect at this point. But Andy McCabe, the former deputy director of the FBI, admitted that the FISA warrants used to spy on President Trump and his campaign, then candidate Trump, would never have been obtained without the dossier. A dossier that everyone knew was fake, but kept using as the basis for the spying. Now, once Mueller took over the investigation, when the last one expired, he chose not to renew those warrants. But here's how we know that Mueller knew it was fake. In July of 2017, the text between lead investigator Peter Strzok and his girlfriend Lisa Page, who was a high-level lawyer in the FBI, they demonstrated a clear, unequivocal bias against President Trump. Then in August of 2017, Mueller had relieved Strzok from his post as lead investigator. Page had already resigned. And then McCabe issued on August 2nd a revised memo expanding the scope of Mueller's investigation, which allowed him to go after guys like Manafort, Gates, Papadopoulos, Cohen, Roger Stone, and all the others. So in September of 2017, it would have been time to renew the fourth FISA warrant, and he didn't do it. He didn't do it because he knew that the basis for it was a lie. Now, when it became clear during the course of this investigation that they were not going to be able to make collusion stick, they pivoted towards obstruction. And again, obstruction of what? There has to be an underlying predicate crime that he would be trying to cover up. And let's not lose sight of the fact that Robert Mueller, he's a partisan. He can't stand Trump. He hates Trump as much as any of the leftists out there. So if there was any evidence of collusion, conspiracy, any crime whatsoever, he would have found it and he would be recommending indictments. So all the people that keep asking for the full report to be released and all this madness, they're just holding out hope that the full report will yield something that they can point to and say, see, we told you, he's guilty. But again, guilty of what? But like I said, if anything like that was there, we wouldn't have to wait because Mueller would have recommended indictments. And we'd be having a completely different conversation right now. their Trump derangement syndrome is so acute, it is inducing some serious delusions. Listen to what Eric Swalwell has to say about the dossier. This clip is a bit long, but just listen to this.
So it doesn't bother you that the Clinton campaign paid for a dossier to be put together by someone who had all kinds of ties to intelligence and put together something that turned out to be not necessarily factual? That part of that kind of engagement.
Which part of it hasn't been proved factual?
Well, Christopher Steele himself said it was not a finished work product, and everyone who analyzed it said, well, I mean,
which part was not proved factual?
I mean, are you serious?
Yeah, tell me.
So you think that the dossier? Okay,
which part wasn't
for
proved
one
to be
thing,
factual?
Michael Cohen said he never went to Prague. Do you agree with that?
Which part has been proved not to be factual?
Well, there were basically, a few main tenets of it. One of them was this salacious story about what happened in a hotel. None of that has proved to be factual. The meeting that Cohen supposedly took in Prague was also proved to not have happened. He testified that under oath in front of Congress that he'd never been to Prague.
So now you accept what Michael Cohen said, because if you accept what Michael Cohen said about Prague, then I think you also have to accept that Michael Cohen saw Donald Trump talk to Roger Stone, where Roger Stone said the WikiLeaks attack is happening. So if you're accepting that, then you accept that Donald Trump knew about the Russian interference campaign. And that's the issue here, Martha, is I think you want to have it both ways.
You can be on record as standing by what was found in the dossier. I think that there's, a lot of evidence to refute that.
You can't hold up Michael Cohen to be a saint when he said he didn't go to Prague, but then say
I never
he's
said he was a
lying
saint.
when he said
I'm just talking about what he testified in front of Congress. Look, all I can do is look at the facts of what we have laid out in all of this testimony and take from it what I think any normal person would take from it.
You should go watch that on YouTube, because the look on Martha McCallum's face when he starts talking about that is just she can't believe it, and neither can I, because it's this guy. Yes, Cohen is a proven liar, but it's not a zero-sum game. Andy McCarthy points out in a piece he wrote on Fox News that prosecutors use witnesses all the time that lie about one thing but are truthful about others. It happens. But Cohen is proven to not have visited Prague by virtue of his passport. Could there be a fake passport? Of course there could be. But after 2 years, 2,800 subpoenas, 500 witness interviews, 21 warrants, including FISA renewals and search warrants, and 19 lawyers investigating, they would have found it. There would have been some evidence. Over in Europe, everything is recorded. They would have found evidence of Michael Cohen being over in Prague somewhere, and it wasn't. There's no evidence to suggest that he's been to Prague. It's just mind-numbingly tedious. So despite Swalwell's protestations, the dossier has been proven to not be factual, even by, like Martha pointed out, Christopher Steele, the spy who compiled the dossier. He even said that it wasn't verified. And in light of all of that, and like I said, that was just a really high-level overview, because there is a lot to dig into. 675 days worth of investigation. But in light of all of that, Mueller says President Trump did not collude with Russia. And that was just the beginning of the week, because to add to that, the creepy porn lawyer was arrested the very next day. And then later on, the Pentagon authorized the transfer of $1 billion to go towards building the wall. And then they dispatched the Army Corps of Engineers to begin planning and executing the construction of the wall. Trump's approval rating has jumped 5 points this week. That's a lot of winning. A lot. And I don't think he's tired of winning. He's not done winning, for that matter. So, I mean, this has been a good week, and if he can keep it up, this is not looking good for the Democrats in 2020. Now, obviously, all of this can change on a dime like that. We've seen it happen all the time. So right now, Trump's riding high. He's winning. Great. And as long as he doesn't commit any unforced errors or tweet something ridiculous, I think we'll be fine. Okay, let's move on. For as great a week as the president had, Senator Spartacus has had an almost equally bad week. And now, for his base, he was preaching to the choir, and he probably sounded great to them. But to those of us that actually can think, we know that he's a complete moron. Listen to this.
If I am your president, we are going to bring the fight to the NRA, who wants to represent corporate gun owners, corporate gun corporations, manufacturers, more than they want to represent the people, because this is what they're doing to Americans. They are defending loopholes, like that loophole that if a man is convicted of beating his wife, he can find a loophole to go out and buy a gun and murder her. They are defending not their membership, but loopholes, like the loophole that says that someone on the terrorist no-fly list in our country can still go to a gun show and buy weapons, or that somebody that's convicted of a violent crime can still find a loophole to go and buy a weapon.
Okay. First of all, and I feel like I say this every week whenever we talk about the left and their stances on guns, the scenarios he's describing are not loopholes. And let me just be clear. Loophole suggests that it is by the letter of the law a legal act, even if it may violate the spirit of the law. So let's break down what he said exactly. He said that there is a loophole which allows a convicted wife beater, domestic abuser to go out and buy a gun. Categorically false. If someone's convicted of domestic abuse, he or she is immediately a prohibited possessor and cannot legally purchase a gun anywhere. Did you catch what I just said? I said legally. You can't go to Dick's. Well, nobody can go to Dick's. They stopped selling guns. You can't go to Academy Sports or Bass Pro Shops and buy a gun. You can't go to a brick and mortar gun store and buy a gun. You can't go to a gun show and buy a gun. No dealer is going to sell a gun without a 4473 and a background check. As long as the courts and the law enforcement agencies properly report the convictions, you can't pass a background check. And if you lie on a 4473, you've committed a felony. Felonies are not loopholes. The next ridiculous point he fails to make: there's no such thing as a terrorist no-fly list. There is a no-fly list and there is a selectee list, both of which really only require a reasonable suspicion standard to be met to land you on that list, which is as low as you can possibly, well, not as low as you can possibly get, but it's a really low bar to land yourself on that list. If you share a name or have a similar name as a terrorist, you could land on that list, and you'll never be notified. And then once you do find out, it is extremely difficult to get your name off that list. This is why Second Amendment advocates like myself are against these lists, because without due process, they're unconstitutional. There's no due process that they have to go through to get your name on that list. And then there's a terrorist watch list where you're a known or suspected terrorist. These lists are a topic unto themselves that we could spend an entire show on. But the bottom line is that there needs to be some processes around these lists to make them more palatable, more acceptable. And then he said there's a loophole that allows people convicted of violent crimes like domestic abuse, like we talked about, armed robbery, assault and battery, etc. He says that there's a loophole that allows those people to go out and buy guns. Again, false, categorically false. Anyone convicted of a violent crime like those are prohibited possessors and cannot legally own or purchase a gun. Senator Spartacus is stunningly ignorant on this subject. And not only is he coming for our guns, despite what they'll try and tell you, but he's coming for your money too. And we're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we get back, we're gonna finish up with Senator Spartacus on this. I'll see you on the other side. I said before the break that Senator Spartacus is not only coming for your guns, but he's coming for your money too. Now, according to him, young white people have too much money, and he has introduced a bill aimed at doing something about that.
I have a bill like my baby bonds bill that would literally create accounts for kids that every year.
This is the bill you're working on right now.
Yeah, I've introduced it. It's the only bill I think out there that literally Columbia University said it would close the racial gap.
How does it work?
The income gap. It says every child born in America gets a savings account regardless of income, but every year, based upon your income, you get deposits into that account upwards of $2,000. By the time you're 18, if you're the lowest income American, you could have $50,000, upwards of $50,000 to go to college, to start a business, to buy a home. It virtually eliminates the racial wealth gap, which is something that, again, consciously I thought about. Let's get real policies that are going to put people in a level playing field.
Classic leftist wealth redistribution. His seemingly noble goal with this bill is to close the racial wealth gap, quote unquote. But what does he think this is actually going to do? When a kid turns 18 and has access to this money, sure, there'll be some kids that will use it towards an education or some other worthwhile endeavor. Chances are those kids were raised in households where they were taught the value of an education or a trade or have some entrepreneurial tendencies. Those kids also likely will have been taught the value of saving. But this program isn't going to do anything to encourage it. It won't alter anyone's behavior in any way. So families that did not instill that in their children, this is just going to be free money to them. Now, in the bill, there are some criteria that need to be met in order for the money to be distributed, but there's already a built-in way to get around that. It can be used to fund retirement savings. So you can withdraw retirement savings. Yes, at a significant penalty, sure, but you can still do it. So someone who really wants to can get access to the money and blow it on whatever frivolous pursuit they want to. Now, they already take our money for enough entitlement programs, and we see how well that's working. And based on what I saw in the bill, there are no co-sponsors, no amendments, no debates, and nothing on the schedule. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I really hope it doesn't. The CBO hasn't even done a cost estimate on it yet. Now, as terrible an idea as this bill is, I really hope that Mitch McConnell isn't pulling a Harry Reid. Over 300 bills died while Harry Reid was Senate Majority Leader. So, I mean, at least debate it. He doesn't have to schedule it for a vote, but at least debate it so that he doesn't get compared to Harry Reid in that regard. That would not be a good look. But Senator Spartacus is showing his true socialist tendencies, and that's a dangerous thing for this country. But that's enough about Senator Spartacus, so let's press on. So I finally saw Captain Marvel the other night. Now, it's not the best Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, but it's pretty good. And while watching the movie, I didn't get the sense that they were trying to spoon-feed the audience some sort of feminist agenda. It was heavily focused on women, and they did change the gender of a major character, which usually I disagree with, but in this case, it didn't affect the story or the telling of it much at all. And I was entertained. I will watch it again, and I will buy the extended version and bonus features when it comes out on Amazon.
Nerd alert!
Having said that, there were some problems with the movie. I'm not going to get into spoilers, even though it's been out for quite some time now. I'm not going to spoil it for you if you haven't seen it yet. But there were some scenes that seemed to be cut short, should have been allowed to play out a little bit more. And there were some scenes that were just flat out ridiculous, even for a movie based on a comic book. And that's saying something. There's one part of the movie where you really just have to groan. And my reaction was like, really? I kept waiting for this thing to be revealed because it had been leaked that this thing was going to be revealed. And when it happened, I was just, come on. The action scenes were pretty well done for the most part. The comedic elements were also pretty funny. Not on the level of Guardians of the Galaxy or even Thor Ragnarok, but they were funny. And there were some decent Easter eggs and callbacks. There's actually one scene which is a callback to Sam Jackson's character in Pulp Fiction, which was maybe a lot of people might not have gotten it, but I picked up on it. Brie Larson is serviceable as the character. Maybe she'll get more comfortable in the role, but she's not quite believable to me as Captain Marvel. She's Captain Marvel as a character is often compared to Thor in terms of power. But when you look at Chris Hemsworth, when he was cast and they showed him in his Thor costume, he was Thor. And if they ever have to recast him in this series of movies, they're going to have to work really hard to make it believable. If they recast Captain Marvel, I can think of a number of actresses that could pull it off, and Brie Larson wouldn't be missed. Like I said, though, she did a decent job, and there's a scene where she interacts with Stan Lee, which, even though it only lasts for a second or two, it's one of the best parts of her performance. And I'm not just saying that because it's one of the last times we're ever going to see Stan Lee on screen, but there are a couple of scenes like that, a couple of moments like that where she does nail it, pretty much showing us why she's an Oscar-winning actress. Sam Jackson and Clark Gregg as Nick Fury and Phil Coulson were good, and the de-aging technology they used has come a long way in just a few years. I mean, when they did it with Michael Douglas in Ant-Man, it was pretty obvious. You could tell it was done well, but you could still tell that it was computer generated. This time around, though, if you didn't know what these two guys looked like in real life, you would have no idea that they were using de-aging technology. Although Sam Jackson did run like a 70-year-old man, there's really no way to hide that. But that's neither here nor there. So I had issues with the casting, and some parts of the movie were a bit problematic for me. But overall, I'd give it a B minus. If you're a fan of the MCU and you haven't gone to see it yet because of the controversy surrounding it when it came out, I encourage you to let that go and go see it. In the grand scheme of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it's not necessary that you see it before Infinity War comes out, because this is as much of a backstory of Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. as it is an introduction of another hero. They are already taking your money in the form of taxes, so don't let the leftists rob you of a couple of hours of entertainment too. But that's my review of Captain Marvel. If you were bored, too bad. But we are going to stick with Hollywood for a second, and I think you might find this a little more relevant to what's going on if you didn't enjoy that segment. I just happened to see something on my social media feed that, and I can't remember which one it was, but it's something that bothered me a little bit. Mandy Moore got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Some of you may know who she is, some of you may not. She had some mild success as a singer in the late 90s, early aughts. She pivoted to acting, and she's currently on a show called This Is Us. I haven't seen an episode of the show, but apparently women really like it. Whatever. But stick with me for a second, because there's a point here, a larger point here that I think you'll appreciate. When Mandy Moore is 35, Helen Mirren was 67 when she got hers. Sally Field was 68 when she got hers. Both far more accomplished than Mandy Moore, despite Mandy Moore's success to this point. Clint Eastwood, Denzel Washington, they don't even have stars. They turn them down, but still. When I started this topic, like I said, it bothered me that Mandy Moore at 35 got one, and the two actresses that I previously mentioned were twice her age when they got theirs, or nearly twice her age. And it bothered me because it struck me as just more evidence of the instant gratification society in which we now live. There's no appreciation for, reverence of, no sense of history, no reverence for people who have sustained success with longevity. And that's still true. But while doing some research on it, and I know that's a crazy concept, but I was doing some research and trying to get facts straight before I started speaking on it. And it turns out that there's an actual nomination process, and the nominees have to accept the nomination and then pick a date for the ceremony, and then pay a $40,000 fee for the star. Or the person who made the nomination can pay that fee. And as in the case of Clint Eastwood and Denzel Washington, like I said, they turned it down. So the original thesis to the point I was going to make isn't supported by this scenario. And so now it doesn't bother me in the least that this kid got a star. But the original point that I wanted to make is still valid. The late Andrew Breitbart is famously quoted as saying, "Politics is downstream from culture," and I think that's true. We see how depraved Hollywood has become, and now there's a group of leftists that have signed a letter written by Alyssa Milano, who I used to be a huge fan of, by the way. But she wrote this letter, and they signed on to it, where they're threatening to boycott the state of Georgia if the governor signs House Bill 481, which is the Life Act, Living Infants, Fairness, and Equality, also known as the Heartbeat Bill. There's a couple of things that I find incredibly difficult to believe, and I'm guessing that you do too. First, that this bill is necessary. And second, that these fools find preserving the lives of babies so offensive that they are threatening to boycott the state. Whiskey, Tango, Foxtrot. They want to normalize infanticide. Speaking of which, I really want to see that movie Unplanned. I've been hearing some great things about it. But anyway, they want to normalize infanticide. They have normalized this anything goes mentality, this speak your truth. And what does that even mean? There's truth, and then there's everything else that's not the truth. Whatever makes you feel good, whatever makes you happy, that's their mentality, and that's dangerous, because happiness is an emotion, and emotions are fleeting at best. They're very volatile. And so doing what makes you happy in one context, once that context changes, may be something else entirely. And doing whatever makes you happy may completely leave out any consideration for other people around you. And so, I mean, this is a whole other topic that we could spend another whole show on, but let's just leave it at that for now. So if you believe, as I do, that politics is downstream from culture, and the current mantra of the Hollywood elites, and I don't even like using that word because there's nothing about them that's elite. There's no definition of the word that can describe these people. But they have this anything goes mentality, this do whatever makes you happy, speak your truth as their current mantra. And we're seeing that play out in politics today. If your truth doesn't comport with facts, provable, verifiable facts, then your truth is a lie, no matter how many times you repeat it. And we're seeing that with old shifty Adam Schiff and that other mental giant, Eric Swalwell. Shifty supposedly has evidence that Trump colluded, which we still haven't seen. He's not accepting Mueller's findings, and he's still saying that there's evidence. This isn't the Matrix, and Shifty is not the one. You can't bend reality to be what you want it to be. You can't speak your truth. There's the truth, and then there's everything else. The left lives in the world of everything else. Well, folks, we are out of time. That half hour went quick. I wanted to get into the Jussie Smollett situation, but we'll have to do that another time. But if you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave a review. Let us know what you think. Let's get some discussions going. You can find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and you can also follow me. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at The Liberty Cast on all three platforms, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say. But until next time, keep your head on a swivel and stay safe, everybody.